So we have Wandering Mage, which is a white, blue, black creature, 0/3 for 3 mana. It's pretty bad. It's got 3 different activate abilities for each different coloured mana that basically just try to prevent damage. The only one we're really concerned about is the black. You pay a black, you can put a -1/-1 counter on target creature you control to prevent up to 2 damage to any player. So putting a -1/-1 counter on a creature is useful because if you do it to a creature with a +1/+1 counter, then they offset each other and both counters are removed. In the future, you would expect that some interaction involving that would come up. And if it's something that's a really good interaction, then the value of this card would go up. But I can't see myself specking on it at this time. You got Royal Decree, which is like a 4 mana enchantment with a cumulative upkeep of 1 white. It's another one of those hate cards that I mentioned before. In this iteration, what you got is whenever a swamp, mountain, black permanent, or red permanent becomes tapped, the decree deals 1 damage to the permanent's controller. So all of the things I mentioned about hate cards previously apply to this one, and I don't think it's that good. It's not strong enough to be a card that you'd want to spec on. Fairy Noble, it's 3 mana 1/2 flying in green. Yeah, it's okay. All fairy creature types that you control get +0/+1. It's mediocre. And then all fairies you control get +1/+0 until end of turn if you tap this. So that's pretty mediocre until that ever comes up and becomes a relevant thing. I don't think it's going to really matter. Keep an eye on it, but don't spec. Sol Devi Digger is a 2 mana artifact. You can pay 2 to put the top card of your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So it seems like it's an obscure kind of ability. It's interesting, and it gives you a second chance to cast a key card that's already gone to the graveyard. But that's the problem. It's putting it on the bottom, and how are you going to get that card again? It's worse than Flashback, but if you've got another second card that can sort of work to fish it out of your library, then it becomes good. Is it worth putting in all the hard yards to get there? Probably not. But I think it might come up sooner or later, this interaction, so not really something to spec on now, but you've got to keep an eye on these new cards they print. Whenever they work well with another old card, be ready to pounce on them. Polar Kraken, 8 and 3 blue for an 11/11 creature with trample, and it's got a cumulative upkeep. You have to sacrifice a land, and it comes into play tapped. So all around, it's pretty bad. One of the worst creatures. People would avoid it like the plague. I can't see anything saving this card. Nothing can make it good, so it's probably not worth specking on. Fungal Bloom is a 2 green enchantment. You pay 2 green and you can put a spell counter on target fungus. Okay, so it's a Thallid style card. I don't think those cards are strong or broken, and this is just playing small incremental benefits for playing the fungus cards. It's not very good, so not worth specking on. Okay, you look at a card like Corrosion, 3 mana enchantment with a cumulative upkeep of 1, but then it starts to really affect artifacts in a big way. This card I think is actually really good. It's Hidden Gem. It's a good way to deal with people who play a lot of artifacts, and people don't usually play artifacts with a high casting cost, mana cost, so this will start wiping those artifacts off the board pretty quick. I reckon this is a kind of card that you probably want to have a few of spec-wise if you find people selling them cheap because they don't see the possibilities in it. Yeah, just pick it up. Omen of Fire, 5 mana, so it's a red card. It's an instant. You return all islands to their owner's hands, and each player sacrifices a plains or white permanent for each white permanent he or she controls. So this is really strong. It's another one of those hate cards. All the things apply that I've said about hate cards before. This one is really strong against white permanents, dealing with them pretty well. And returning all islands to the owner's hands is pretty big as well. I think this is probably one of the stronger of the hate cards, but the mana cost is much higher as well. But I don't think it's something to be specking on. Contract from Below, very popular card for some reason, even though you can't play it. It's an anti card, no one plays for anti anymore, so it's got no real value. You shouldn't be specking on it. Hand of Justice, which is 5 and a white for a 2/6 creature, which is pretty poor. But then you can tap this card plus 3 white creatures you control to destroy any target creature. So the effect is really strong. It's sort of better than a Royal Assassin in some ways, but then the mana cost is huge. And then the ability activation cost of tapping 3 white creatures, it could be difficult as well. So it's got some positive points, some negative points. It's not such a big card, or it's not like going under the radar, so I don't think it's worth specking on. But it's just another card, really. Ring of Gix, 3 mana artifact, sort of a fixed icy manipulator. It's not really that strong. It's pretty bad. It's got Echo, so you have to pay the mana cost a second time. It's pretty weak in general terms, so I don't think anyone should be specking on it. We've got Phyrexian Portal, which is a strange card. It's a 3 mana artifact, 3 mana to activate. What it does is sort of a pseudo draw card ability. I don't think it's to your benefit to use it. I think your opponent is getting a better deal by separating your cards into a pile, and you exiling one pile and sifting through another for a single card. But I'm thinking there's got to be a situation where you're playing a sort of deck that doesn't give you much card draw, or you really need to sort of dig in there, and it could be beneficial. But because it's face down piles, it's really bad. So I don't see this ever being really strong. That it'll be sought after, so probably stay away. Okay, you got Brushwag, 3 mana cost green creature, 3/2. This is just pretty bad in general. I don't think it's got any reason to be expensive, so don't spec on it at all. Halls of Mist, cumulative upkeep of 1. It's a land, doesn't produce any mana. No creature can attack if it attacked during its controller's last turn. So, yeah, it's a fairly strong effect, but then sort of you can't really control whether somebody's going to attack on any specific turn. I don't think the card is overpowered. I think it's more of a nuisance than anything else. But I'm sure sooner or later it'll come up in a game, and it will be an important deciding factor. So it's sort of like a here and there kind of guess. I'm sure I'd just get one just to make sure I have a copy, but I don't think it's extremely hidden spec that we need to go deep on. So leave it at that. Mist Dragon, it's a pretty poor creature, 6 mana for a 4/4. Give it flying, loses flying, phases out, those kind of things is not super relevant, so I don't think it's worth specking on. Catacomb Dragon, 6 mana, 4/4 flying dragon in black. It's okay whenever the dragon is blocked by a non-artifact, non-dragon creature. The blocking creature's power is halved, so it's got some staying ability. But then again, it's only a 4/4, so it's not super big. People can ignore it, or if they're going to block it, they might have something strong enough to block it profitably when you're casting this at 6 mana and then attacking on turn 7, something like that. It's not really a big scary threat, so I don't think it's worth specking on at all. Righteous War, which is a 3 mana enchantment, black and white, and it gives all white creatures you control protection from black, and all black creatures you control from protection from white. Um, I'm not sure if that's a really strong card. I don't see the application there, how it's extremely powerful or anything, so probably nothing to spec on there. Okay, we have Soul Echo, which is a white enchantment. Uh, it's basically a wall of text, and basically what it does is um, you can put a whole lot of counters on the Soul Echo, and then you don't lose the game. When you get to 0 life, they have to remove all the counters as well. Um, they can always just remove this and then just deal you damage normally, so it's not like it's really hobbling the game in any way. I think it's a lot of fuss for a pretty weak card, so this shouldn't be really worth a lot. So don't try and spec on it. And then we're looking at Ice Cauldron, an Ice Age rare, 4 mana artifact, wall of text. But this one actually is an okay card. Um, it's got quite a few moving parts to it, so if you just read the card, you'll understand what it does. But the main point is that it's a pretty good card that can be used in a few combos, but also generating quite a big advantage depending on how you're playing it. Um, I think these are treated as crap cards by people, but in actual fact, they're not that bad. So you should be able to get them in trades or picking them up from the store cheaper than they should be worth. I mean, I have a copy, and I'd pick up more if I came across them, but I won't go out of my way to just go buy up copies. Okay, we've got Null Chamber, 4 mana enchantment. This is actually a pretty good card. If there's any particular cards that you have problems dealing with or you hate playing against, you pop this in your deck, name that card, you don't have to deal with it. And then your opponent also gets to do the same back to you, which, depending on how you play, could be a big deal, might not be a big deal at all. So, uh, yeah, this one, for building decks, it's good, but for specking on, depends. If you see there's a lot of demand from players to play this, then obviously you should snap some up because it's reserve list. They're not going to reprint it. You can sort of get in there. But yeah, I think it's an okay card, so keep an eye on it. Maybe get them if you think they're too cheap. Okay, we have Three Wishes, which is 1 and 2 blue, instant. You get the top 3 cards of your library and you put them aside, and you can just play them until your next turn. They're treated as if they're in your hand. It's a great card. It's an effect that is in red more and more now. They print a lot of cards in red that do this sort of effect. Now, the problem I have is I think this sort of card, or something very close to it, or something slightly better, can certainly be printed again. Probably not in blue, because I don't think it's a blue ability much anymore. But certainly they could push it a little bit more on a card, but that's neither here or there. So if you're playing it, yeah, it's a good card that you might have overlooked. If you're trying to spec, I'd say be careful. Don't try and go too deep. And that's about it. Okay, we have Weatherseed Tree Folk. 5 mana, 5/3 trample, pretty poor. And when the Tree Folk is put into the graveyard from play, you can return it to your hand. So it's a bit of a bad squee. Not really as good. Yeah, it's okay-ish, but I don't think it's strong or can be broken in any way. So avoid this card.